Wolfpack, what is going on? It's your boy, the Wolf of Roto Street. RotoStreetJournal.com, we breed and feed you fantasy wolves. Here with your Week 2 preview. A day early. I appreciate if you're jumping in with us live ahead of time. Normally we go live Thursday at 6:45 p.m. I have student parent teacher night tomorrow, so I had to bump this up a little bit early. Appreciate it. I know it's more fun right before kickoff. I know we have fresher news, which is something to consider. If you're listening to this the next day in the podcast form, there will be some updates to this injury report, but just wanted to make sure I could get live. If any of you had some early sit start questions, get them on in the comments. If you're catching this after the fact, please do comment them on the show. I'll make sure to try to hit every single one of those before Sunday. And as always, we'll be live Sunday, me and my man CJ, 10:45 to get back to all your sit starts as well. But wanted to make sure to get out my higher, lower Hail Marys, as you've always come to expect. My Thursday night preview in case you're doing some betting or showdown content, and get again to any questions that you might have ahead of here. So come on in, Wolfpack. If you enjoy what you hear at any minute, that thumbs up button is so greatly appreciated. We've been getting some great steam on YouTube because so many of you are joining into the pack, enjoying what you hear, and coming in for that live show. So let's dive right into the action and talk about tomorrow night's game as the crowd starts to build here. We got a good one. The Vikings versus the Eagles, over under 49. You love to see that potential points factory type of style game here. How do I expect this to go? The Eagles are -6, and I'm going to say they cover. Primetime Kirk Cousins, we saw it as early as last year, right around this time, got absolutely smashed 24-7 and just looked abysmal the entire time, did Kirk Cousins. And I think this defense might do it to him again. So I think the Eagles do cover at home, their first game, kick it off right fresh off a near Super Bowl win. The home crowd will be bumping at the link. So I think the Eagles do ultimately win this one, but I also do think Kirk Cousins will keep it closer than last year, given there's some big injuries in this game. And let's talk about one of the most impactful ones, and I'll give you my over-under pick for this week. One of the biggest injuries of the week, though, Kenny Gainwell already ruled out for week 2. If you caught last night's waiver wire stream, this is why we had him down at 5-6 on the list, saying he could be fool's gold. He had that rib injury and could ultimately get taken over as early as this week if Swift and or Rashad Penny end up impressing. Well, Gainwell's out, and remember, he didn't do a ton with his work. Why we liked him that week was because of the usage. Over 60% of the snaps, nearly 70% of the carries, 86% of the running back carries there too for Kenny Gainwell. But on those 14 attempts, he only racked up about 45 yards. Didn't look overly impressive with it. Did get a couple targets tossed in there as well. So weighted opportunity. He was definitely the guy. And again, a enormous snap share now opened up over 60%. Who's going to come in and take that over? I imagine it's DeAndre Swift. They went and traded out for this guy, and Nick Sirianni after the game highlighting that we don't ever want to come out of games where DeAndre Swift only touches the ball twice. He did right after say there's going to be some games where he carries the load for the game and other games where he will be in that same role where he's more of a complementary piece. So it's up or down the comments, but this is going to be his time to shine. And this guy, DeAndre Swift, I get coaches all over the world seem to hate him despite all the love fantasy owners have always had for him. I've never been a big Swift guy. I do think he's a bit soft, plays soft, but he is an explosive playmaker and a phenomenal receiver, averaging he was third last year in points per touch in fantasy, and I imagine those touches are going to go up quite significantly this week. I do think Rashad Penny's going to be active, and compared to Swift, I actually am more of a Rashad Penny guy. It was just a couple seasons ago that he was the number one running back in your fantasy playoffs. If you look at all the explosive run metrics, his volume has been so low because of injury these last 2 years, and yet he's still in all the top 5 lists in 10-plus yard runs and certainly explosive run rate given the small percentage of runs we're dealing with. Penny is a very talented runner. I think both of these backs can do significantly more damage than what we saw from Kenny Gainwell if used to a similar extent behind this top 3 offensive line in the league and one of the best offenses in the league overall. I think points will be at tons of them all over the board. And my first guess would be DeAndre Swift. He bumps all the way up to my running back 30. Definitely in flex consideration, RB2 consideration, and this could end up bumped up even more tomorrow, so definitely check rotostreetjournal.com if you want to see the ultimate where I rank him. I'll make sure to tweet out also at RotoStreetWolf as well, but I right now have him as that fringe flex play just given the uncertainty here in this Nick Sirianni offense. I also have Rashad Penny clocking in right now at running back 35 or so in the rankings. And I'm looking through them right now, and I might even bump up Swift a little more, but does he go above Najee Harris, Javonte Williams, Pacheco? That's the range, the tier I have him joining at least. So you can consider him a low-end RB2 to quality flex play. And meanwhile, I have Rashad Penny clocking in right at running back 40 behind Rashawn Johnson, one of my favorite Hail Marys of the week. So that's where I see this stacking up. But if Penny got dropped and you can pick him up ahead of the game, a great player to have on your bench tryout. If Swift, an impatient owner, dropped him, definitely pick him up. Let's see what these backs do. This is probably going to be the best chance they get unless this rib injury lingers. But I think either of them, if they shine, could take over the starting role for this backfield for however long they stay healthy, because we know they have injury concerns as well. Other than that, they know for some injury news that James Bradberry is going to be out for the Eagles. That's part of the reason why I don't mind Kirk Cousins. He's my quarterback 14. I'm +4 ECR, and I'm down at quarterback 18. This man was on pace for 500 yards plus in the first half against the Bucs, and I know that's the big rub. What did he do in the second half, Wolf? He always crumbles. What happened there? I get that. It's a fair criticism. And plus, primetime Kirk Cousins, it does make you nervous. You also have to be nervous about the fact that Garrett Bradberry, that stalwart center for him, he's going to be out. And as soon as he got knocked out, fumbled snap, next play there. So definitely needs some improved chemistry with that center. Plus the left tackle, the anchor of this line, Christian Darrisaw, is questionable. That would definitely change my outlook for Kirk Cousins. If he's ruled out, plus up in the interior, I mean, this is one of the most ferocious, the Eagles' front seven in the entire game. I think it'll be all over Kirk Cousins entire night. So that makes me a little bit concerned should he lose his left tackle. But assuming Darrisaw plays, I still could have Kirk Cousins right around my top 15 quarterbacks as a low-end QB1, given they're going to be chasing points, given that Mac Jones ultimately just threw for over 316 yards and 3 touchdowns on this defense, the quarterback 2 in fantasy right now. And then they're now missing, again, James Bradberry, one of the key pieces for that secondary. So I actually do think the over 49 is a lot of points. I'm going to take the under, but I bet you it gets right to 47. It's going to be right there. I think Kirk Cousins definitely gives a better effort. Meanwhile, the Eagles put up 25, anywhere over 25 points in their return to home. So that's our Thursday night preview. Let me know what you guys think, and we'll obviously be able to revisit it. You can shit on me if I am completely far off on these. But let's now dive into, got over 12 questions already. Keep it coming. Thursdays we usually get 100, 120. I know this is not the usual time. This will be the only time we go live on Wednesdays, given, again, parent-teacher night. Let's move on now to the key news of the week, starting with quarterbacks. Anthony Richardson, not on the Colts Week 2 injury report. Great to see. We saw him get a little bit dinged up there towards the end of the game, but he is back to full health. It sounds like it was a non-factor, that bruise, and ultimately I expect him to have a very solid performance after he was a top 5 quarterback in Week 1. Gets a nice matchup here against Houston, one of the worst run defenses in the league. I could see Richardson running for 70 yards plus, maybe even finding the end zone. A great top 10 quarterback play. Meanwhile, the Bears reportedly shaken by their Week 1 performance against the Packers. Fields saying himself, I played a little too conservative at times. You think? We're going to talk about him more in higher, lower Hail Mary. You can probably guess which direction I'm headed with Justin Fields, but it was an embarrassing game plan. Pathetic, only screens pretty much, not letting him run at all. We have the data to back that up. If that's what they're going to do, similar to those first few weeks of last year, I want nothing to do with it. Get me out of here. So until I see Justin Fields used to his potential, I want nothing to do with him. Moving to the running back position, Austin Eckler not participating in practice on Wednesday. They call up a running back from the practice squad. Signs are pointing to him missing this game, which would obviously be tough. It is a brutal run defense that Josh Kelly, the man of the hour, averaged over 10 yards a pop. He had 10 plus yards on almost 20% of his carries. That was among the highest explosive run rates in the league for Josh Kelly. He got 16 carries, also had that touchdown matching Austin Eckler in usage and playing near equal snaps. Now, a lot of that did come in the fourth quarter after the ankle injury, but Kelly was mixing in throughout the game. A clear focal point is the run for Kellen Moore. The big word of caution, though, is the Tennessee Titans defense is absolutely phenomenal against the run. The second worst matchup for running backs last year. Still a really tough one this year as well, swallowing up that Jamal Williams-led Saints last week. So I like Kelly. Definitely one of the priority waiver pickups as a handcuff with benefits, maybe the clearest picture of a handcuff with benefits in the league. That being said, if you lost Eckler and you have nothing else, of course you can play Kelly. He's a fringe top 35 running back for me, but I would rather go to DeAndre Swift. I would rather go to a few other guys that might be out there on your waiver wires that we'll talk about in a little bit. Meanwhile, Aaron Jones, one of the stars of week 1, 177 yards, 2 scores through about 3/4 of action. He's ultimately expected. We don't know yet, but he did sit today in practice. So I don't want to speculate right now. He did say it was just a little pop and that he should be fine, but a little pop, that doesn't sound great to me. So I ultimately do think he'll play, given the optimism him and the team are expressing. It doesn't sound like a huge injury here. And if he's in, Aaron Jones was that dominant that you have to have him back in. So we'll find out more as the week goes on. Keep monitoring it. Cordarrelle Patterson, full participant in practice, just enough time to make this backfield that much muddier. We're shocked at how much of a committee it was with Tyler Algier. Don't be shocked at all if Cordarrelle Patterson eats into those 6 targets we saw Bijan rack up, a 33% target share for Bijan. That's what sustained a lot of his value this last week. I do think Bijan is still an absolute monster, but I am worried Arthur Smith, who doesn't care about us fantasy nerds, he just wants to win. I mean, why not use your top 8 draft capital picks? We could go on a rant about that. It's not just about the fantasy nerds. Use your best players, dude. But Cordarrelle Patterson did have some big games. We're also going to talk about him in the Hail Mary section in a little bit more depth, but I think he will be one of those guys you can see in the crystal ball a lot of owners go and scramble for in the week 3 waiver wire next week. Called Kyron Williams last time. I'm calling that Cordarrelle Patterson, and one other guy we'll talk about in a little bit will be those priority pickups entering week 3 at the running back position. Raheem Mostert, no stranger to the injury report. He's back on it, non-participant in practice, but ultimately it comes out from Cameron Wolf that he was just veteran rest maintenance, probably just prepping him for another big workload coming up against the Patriots. So Raheem Mostert, I am not worried about him missing this, but maybe we do get a little bit of Devon A-Chain here in this game. Would be exciting to see that rookie who had some great hype coming out of OTAs, some training camp highlights before getting hurt. It would be awesome to see him get to the field. And if we got even a little bit of banged up Mostert, maybe we do see that. And last, let's dive into the hideous Colts backfield, where Evan Hull has been placed on the IR, but Zach Moss is now a full participant in practice. Jake Funk ended up becoming the lead back here after Deion Jackson. Completely pathetic. 13 carries, 14 yards. Did get some targets, did absolutely nothing with him. I've never seen somebody do less with more than Deion Jackson this past week. So I imagine Zach Moss will be walking right into the starting role. He's also going to be facing a Houston team that gave up the most yards of all teams last year, the most points to running backs last year, and didn't look overly great against the Ravens this last week. So Zach Moss, you'd have to be pretty desperate to go to those levels, but he's right around the Josh Kelly ranks for me, given the juicy matchup, given the very just pathetic lack of competition ahead of him. Moving on to wide receivers here, Wolfpack. Deontay Johnson is expected to miss about 4 weeks now. Brutal injury. He was clicking, one of the few highlights of the Steelers team in that first week, and now he goes down. So in his absence, George Pickens, you'd think he'd be the one to get a huge bump up. Now is Allen Robinson leading the team in 8 targets and looking okay in the slot. We've seen this happen before with aging veterans that moved the slot and ultimately used their craftiness to get on open. That happened with Allen Robinson. I'm not going back. I can never go back. I'll never trust him again. But for you very, very deep leagues, I mean, I'm in a 16-teamer for one of my leagues. This might be the spot you could consider going to Allen Robinson while Deontay Johnson is out. I don't love it. I do think George Pickens will continue to evolve his role, maybe get some more of those layup targets. And also Calvin Austin, an exciting talent, did see 6 targets last week against Cleveland. Maybe he gets a bit of a bump. Looked very impressive all preseason, much more explosive than Allen Robinson. If you want more of an upside stash, I think Calvin Austin might be the guy you should look for. And then at the Raiders, Devontae Adams and Jacoby Myers, who combined for a whopping 72% of the target share, the most we've seen in so many years. Last year, the highest wide receiver duo was 52%, the Eagles duo combining for that. So this was a monstrous performance for them, but both of them are out at practice this week. Myers in concussion protocol. At this point, after a whopping 38% target share, 2 touchdowns, 90 yards, and monster debut for Jacoby Myers in a Raiders uniform. Ultimately, it seems like he's trending towards being out as he sits in the concussion protocol. Meanwhile, Adams missed practice for the foot injury. This does have a little bit more of a veteran rest day type of feel. I imagine Adams plays, and I imagine Adams smashes if there is no Jacoby Myers to contend with. The Bills, yeah, it's great secondary. They are very solid, but ultimately I could see Adams racking up 12, 15 type targets in the absence there of Jacoby Myers. Romeo Doubs, to the Packers we go. Limited in practice, but expected to play this week. He was limited all last week and racked up 16 fantasy points thanks to 2 touchdowns. That very nice chemistry on display with Jordan Love. Definitely a guy you can toss into your wide receiver 3 spots should Christian Watson, who did not practice on Wednesday, be out. Now, he was seen doing Watson more rehab work at practice on Wednesday off to the sides. So it's a promising sign. He did nothing last week. So we're trending towards the right direction. But man, 2023, the year of the hamstring, as we're going to talk about with another tight end in a second. This is not what you want to see from him. But if he misses, Dobbs will be a fringe top 36 wide receiver play in a decent matchup entering the week. Despite, again, only playing 48% of the snaps, he still posted 16 fantasy points there. So check out Romeo Doubs if you're missing any time. And last but not least, at the wide receiver position, 2 more notes. Brandon Cooks has a chance to play. Whoa, that one came out of nowhere. So doesn't feel great if he only has a chance to play. Now, that could end up being more targets for Gallup. Of course, CeeDee Lamb there. But against the Jets, I don't really love either of these options. So it's a scare. Of course, you're not benching CeeDee Lamb at this point, but just a concern to not have that field stretcher. Another reason to be down on Dak Prescott, as we'll talk about. DeAndre Hopkins, the absolute target hog, not practicing, ankle injury. I imagine this is more just veteran rest, but something to track as we move through the week. 13 targets, nearly 40% share this past week was the clear-cut focal point of this passing game. So just something to monitor there. DJ Chark also back to practice for the Panthers on Wednesday. Oh, who gives a crap? Well, the receivers were that bad that maybe DJ Chark could evolve into that true number 1, a lean-on type of option. He can get it done at every layer of the field and especially deep. So I am excited to see this offense. They had no field stretchers. Mingo should be able to do it, but wasn't really asked to. So who knows if Chark will actually be used to. But a lot of the training camp reports were he was the go-to deep guy throughout those practices. And the last note, and this one's a little bit more important at wide receiver, Noah Brown going to injured reserve. That's actually pretty important here, considering that Noah Brown ran the most routes of any wide receiver. He didn't end up dominating the target share, didn't do much with it. Really no surprise there. But he's going to now miss at least 4 games. Sounds like Tank Dell is going to be the one taking the starting spot there. And that's big news because Tank Dell, only 4% rostered right now, I think could be a very intriguing stash and potential stream should you need him. He only played about 37% of the snaps last week, Tank Dell, but still racked up 4 catches, 34 yards. He's a favorite of CJ Stroud. We'll talk about him a little bit later here. But ultimately, it will be intriguing to see how this shakes out with Noah Brown again. Didn't demand a ton of targets, but definitely ran, again, the most routes on the team. This could be a situation to monitor. John Mechie also returning to practice, so maybe he gets a little work himself. But they did cite out the training staff, the coaching staff that Tank Dell would be the guy. And last but not least, well, actually last and very much least, Chase Claypool likely to be a healthy scratch after his abysmal effort for the Bears this last Sunday. They have seen enough. What a horrible second round, first pick of the second round, traded away for Chase Claypool. Just an abysmal move for them. And it looks like we have a super chat. Thank you so much, NC Firearms, hitting us with the super chats in back-to-back weeks. It is not unnoticed. It's greatly appreciated, and it goes a long way. D. Jones or Brock Purdy. I actually like D. Jones to bounce back this week. Arizona, where they looked a little bit scrappier than people expected. Maybe the secondary is not quite as bad as everybody thought. I also think Sam Howell might just be worse than we all thought, and I was definitely a Howell believer. He got cut by my team. I think Daniel Jones will rebound. This Giants team just unleashes. Purdy's certainly the safer option. If you want the floor of 16 to 18 points, I mean, he's going to get you that. He's got elite weapons, and he operates this offense to perfection. The first guy to win all his regular season starts and throw 2+ touchdowns. The guy is rock solid. But I just love the ceiling of Daniel Jones. I think he could rip it up. And again, this Giants team just goes nuts there. And then D. Pierce or Kendrick Bourne for a PPR flex. Ooh, I mean, this is such a crazy thing that this is even being asked, and it's even crazier that I'm actually leaning Kendrick Bourne. We'll talk about both these guys in higher, lower Hail Mary, but around a 46% snap player for Dameon Pierce, loses all the third down work. Now he gets Indianapolis, and I think that is a significantly improved matchup here. Maybe the game flow will be in his favor. Both those teams really suck, so that's going to be a battle of shit. But ultimately, Dameon Pierce, it's tough. I really like Kendrick Bourne. I do. I think 93% of the routes, he is the number one receiver for an ascending Pats aerial attack. Call me crazy, NC Firearms, but unless you just, I think Pierce is the better lock for like 7 to 10. Maybe he finds the end zone and then ultimately gets to like 15. But I think Kendrick Bourne is the much more high upside play here, which is nuts for a guy that's only 30% rostered. Thank you so much for the super chat, NC Firearms. Again, back-to-back weeks. It is not unnoticed. It's greatly appreciated. Thank you for that. Now moving on to the tight end position, a couple big names at the top here. Travis Kelce returned to practice on Wednesday. You watched the game. You saw how fired up he was on the sideline, animated, moving around. I imagine, given how bad this aerial attack, that Kelce will absolutely be out there against the Jags, one of the best matchups of the weekend. Cannot wait to see how that one goes. So it's, again, questionable right now is what he's listed as. I think he's going to be back, and of course, he's your number one tight end. And right behind him, Mark Andrews, number 2 tight end. He practiced on Wednesday. Less of a lock, in my opinion, given he had 3 limited sessions last week and still sat out on Sunday. So I don't think he's out of the woods, but we did have John Harbaugh say he's moving around much better here. So I think we can get Mark Andrews back. And if he is, he's right back to your number 2 tight end. And of course, you're firing him right back up. And another big tight end, the last tight end note we have too, Darren Waller's hamstring could be a quote-unquote lingering issue. Again, the year of the hamstrings. It is painful now. Cooper Kupp, Christian Watson, and Darren Waller. Everybody wants to talk about how the nerves and not the muscle. It just sucks. It sounds like he's going to be out there, but if he's limited, he doesn't even barely plays and already he's binged up. And I know I was conducting the Darren Waller hype train, especially when he was going around 7 or 8 pick. I kind of stopped drafting him in underdog when he was more in that 5-6 range. I had enough of my shares here. I really hope this isn't something that lingers. This was going to be the key to unlock all the other weapons in this offense, the focal point, the true wide receiver one, the Daniel Jones breakout. I think it really is reliant on Darren Waller giving this offense a new dimension. So if that is not going to be the Waller we get this year, I'd be very concerned. Now, the Cardinals were the worst team by a mile last year against the tight end position. So if you have Waller, I think you got to fire him up and let's see what happens. But this just feels like a ticking time bomb, as he really always is. So some concerns there for Darren Waller. A couple defensive notes too. J.C. Horn, really the only one. Carlton Davis for the Bucs as well. 2 important cornerbacks. Carlton Davis is questionable. He might play, but J.C. Horn will be out an extended period of time for the Panthers. By far their best corner. So that is something to make sure to note. Now you got Chris Olave, Rashid Shaheed coming to town. I think the Saints offense can bury this Panthers team. If you need a quarterback streamer, Derek Carr is still out there in a lot of leagues. Already, Wolfpack. We're going to be moving to higher, lower Hail Mary. As always, if you enjoy what you're hearing, the thumbs up button is so greatly appreciated. When done with that, it's on to all your questions. Get them on in, and if you're catching the replay, please do comment. I'll make sure to hit as many as I can. All of them. All the questions that we get on here, we'll be sure to answer ahead of Sunday. So please do consider questioning, commenting, and of course, liking this post and joining the Wolfpack if you enjoy what you're hearing live multiple times a week, 4 times, to answer all your questions. All righty, guys. It is time for higher, lower Hail Mary. Starting off at the quarterback position, my higher of the week, real bold, Wolf, Tua, the number 1 quarterback in fantasy. Somehow he's only ranked as the number 10 quarterback by the ECR. I have him at quarterback 7 and probably climbing up even higher. 3 spots above the ECR as of right now, though. 466 yards and 3 touchdowns this last week for Tua, averaging an absurd 10.36 yards per attempt, over 11.8 yards of ADOT. So this was not just Tua, dink and dunk and go do your thing, guys, which plenty of that, given how good Tyreek Hill is, it makes sense to maximize that skill set. But he was slinging it deep, more than enough there, Tua, completing 62% of his passes with those impressive deep target numbers. It is great. Now, this won't be a Chargers track meet against the Patriots defense here in Sunday Night Football. It's definitely a stronger defense, in my opinion, but we just saw the Pats put up some decent numbers against the Eagles. You can't rule out that this game gets broken up a little bit if Mac Jones, 316 yards and 3 touchdowns, keeps it going. I think that he could keep pace and keep Tua with the gas pedal down. I love this guy. He's an every week starter over Burrow, over Fields. Make sure you have Tua in your lineups if you have him. For as long as you have him, it's going to be a beautiful ride. He really could get MVP consideration if he keeps this up. So fire him up. Definitely the quarterback one in fantasy should be in your lineups, not a fringe starter, as the ECR says. After him, I've just talked about, I do like Daniel Jones, my quarterback 11 +2 on the ECR. I'm not going to let the dream die after one horrendous week. I think the Cowboys are just that good. They were all over him all night. I do not think the Cardinals are going to hold a candle to that defense. And I think the Giants are going to come in here with a fury of a million suns trying to unload, and what a team to do it against. Maybe they're a little scrappier than we thought. I agree. Cardinals, again, they looked better. And maybe the Commanders, though, just aren't anything special. So Daniel Jones, I think this is where we get the real coming out party, and he starts to make my prediction look smarter. Let's pray and hope for my wallet this year. Lower this week at the quarterback position, Justin Fields, my quarterback 10 at Tampa Bay. That's 2 spots below the ECR. He's ranked ahead of Tua. I just cannot wrap my head around that at all. The abysmal, conservative, soft play con, freaking 3.8 average depth of target, 5.8 yards per attempt. Can you talk about a more pathetic? Both the lowest in the league to kick off the season. It was almost only designed screens and 10% designed rushes. What are we doing here, Luke Getsy? This is one of the biggest jokes of an offense so far. It is back to square one where we started last year, and Justin Fields was cuttable. Now, I don't think this is going to linger all year, and at any moment when they decide, let's finally turn the keys up, let him run a bit more with Fields, maybe we finally use TJ Moore down the field. This was a good Packers secondary, so I can't rule out that played a big factor here, but Tampa Bay's defense ain't too bad either. One of my favorite streamers, in fact, of the week. They still have Shaq Barrett, Levante David, Devin White, Carlton Davis, all Super Bowl standovers from that last amazing squad. They just held the Vikings to a much more explosive team, in my opinion, 17 points only. So, yeah, maybe that light switch on the rushing goes off at 8 times. We know Justin Fields himself said, I need to be more aggressive. I was way too conservative out there. I'll believe it when I see it at this point. Yes, a fringe starter for me, but certainly not above Tua. I see him above Burrow, and I expect Burrow to rebound faster than Justin Fields, in my opinion. Also, much lower on Dak Prescott, your quarterback 29 in fantasy so far, despite his team putting up 40 points. Yes, I get it. The defense was so dominant. Dak had to do legitimately nothing because of that. But still, only 6 points is pretty damn concerning as well, given that Brian Schottenheimer, if the game script will allow it, he will just run some more, and that's what we saw already. And against the Jets, I imagine that's going to be the script, because if you beat this defense, which is not easy to do, it's certainly more so over the run than the pass. The best secondary in the league, in my opinion. They just held Josh Allen to under 12 fantasy points. I don't think Dak is going to do better than Josh Allen this week, so I'm benching Dak wherever I have him, despite this offense looking real solid. I just want nothing to do with really this game in general, but especially Dak Prescott. And to my Hail Marys, who would I play above Dak? I'd actually consider streaming Mac Jones against Miami, the current quarterback 2 in fantasy. Yes, let me repeat that. Mac Jones is the quarterback 2 in fantasy against a impressive Eagles secondary and great Eagles defense overall. He ended up putting 25 fantasy points up, over 300 yards, 3 touchdowns, a whopping 54 pass plays, the most in the league. The Bill O'Brien era is off to a hot passing start. You then get Devontae Parker back. Chemistry's all-time high here with Kendrick Bourne and Hunter Henry. I see Mac Jones really clicking right now. And then you get Parker, like I said, back, a touchdown threat, maybe revenge game narrative there. Sure, the Dolphins are secondary, but given how good that offense is, teams are always going to be chasing points against them. I think that continues for Mac Jones here, and he goes crazy. Now, on my watch list, big news will be, is Geno Smith just a one-year wonder? What was that performance in week 1 against what I expected to be a pretty hapless Rams secondary? Maybe they're better than expected too, or maybe Geno is a one-year wonder. Certainly something we need to monitor on our watch list, as well as, is Kellen Moore going to turn up the pace, the passing? He had a great offense. Don't get me wrong. One of the top teams in scoring so far in the NFL, but so much of that came in the run game. he was bottom half in the league in total pace right now. I think against a Tennessee pass funnel, he absolutely turns it up. But something to note, something to be concerned about there at the quarterback position. Let's watch it and find out what happens. At running back, high or low or Hail Mary, we all know so much running back fantasy value comes from usage. And that's going to dominate the player takes I have on here. And I'm going to shout out Fantasy Life. They have a new tool called the Utilization Hub. Dwayne McFarland developed it, one of my favorite analysts in the game. And it is unbelievable. Everybody should check out the Fantasy Life Utilization Hub. I have already been having a field day with it. And I use that to garner a ton of my usage stats here today. Starting with Kenneth Walker. He's my running back 9, 3 spots above the ECR. I think most people would be starting Kenneth Walker. This is also in terms of trading, buy low, sell high. I think we are due for a massive breakout season from Walker if the usage we saw in week 1 continues. He didn't get any touchdowns, but 65% of the snaps, 71% of the rush attempts. That's elite. 55% of the routes. That's borderline elite. If you get to 60, 65%, you're a target hog as a running back. And he did see 18% of his targets. 25% of the times he ran a route, he was targeted there. Great to see this increasing role. And without scoring a touchdown, he still was the running back 24 this last week. I think he finds the end zone against a mediocre at best Detroit team. I think Geno Smith does. I talked about him maybe being a one-hit wonder. Let's pay attention. I think he finds his groove again, and Walker helps them establish that. So definitely higher on Walker. Higher on Jamal Williams, my running back 16 plus 7 ECR against Carolina. A lot of people wondering, I got a lot of DMs about, can I go back to Jamal Williams after that shitty week? Well, one, he was facing one of the best run defenses of the last 5 years. The Titans have consistently been brutal matchups for running backs in the Mike Vrabel era. Jamal Williams, meanwhile, now gets Carolina, who I know it's a one-game sample size, but so far have given up the most points to running backs. They got absolutely demolished by Atlanta on the ground last week. And yes, that's a better run team than the Saints. But that type of volume that he saw, let's look at this, Jamal Williams. 77% of the snaps, 69% of the rush attempts, 63% of the routes. Ooh, that is elite usage. And not every matchup is going to be as tough as this Titans team. In fact, Carolina might be the softest matchup in the league. Maybe that was just Atlanta being a dominant run game. I'm sure that factors into this somewhat. But I do think the Saints can run it a lot better than we saw last week. I think Jamal Williams, the leading touchdown scorer last year, can definitely get it done here against Carolina. I also think underlying usage that suggests maybe a breakout comes here. James Conner, it's ugly. 83% of the snaps, 58% of the rushes, 76% of the routes, and 17% target share. Only 12 points last week, but still was the running back 20 on that day. And right now he's being ranked as the running back 25. I don't understand it. I think he absolutely should be a top 20 running back, given the Giants got smashed by Dallas on the ground all day. And yeah, Pollard, an infinitely better talent than James Conner, but he falls into the end zone once and gets 18 points. We're talking about a top 15, not top 15, top 7 running back of last week. And I definitely think Conner, an elite touchdown scorer, can find some success and get into the end zone, get about 18 points, and have a top 10 day. So I really like James Conner. The underlying usage is great there, as well as Brian Robinson, my running back 28, 6 spots above the ECR. He's ranked as pretty much not even a flex play right now. I think you can definitely trust him as a low-end RB2, high-end flex, though. Played 58% of the snaps compared to 37% for Antonio Gibson, but really went out there, heavily used Brian Robinson, 72% of the rushing attempts, and shockingly, 7% of the targets compared to just 4% for Antonio Gibson. After Gibson fumbled, and maybe it was a one-week thing, maybe the coaching staff is just fed up with it. It was a great play by the defender. It wasn't, I think anybody fumbles the ball in that situation, but we know Gibson's history with the Butterfingers. Wouldn't be shocked at all if this trend continues with Brian Robinson just dominating the usage. I don't think Denver, their offense did not look at any bit better. I mean, it couldn't be much worse than last year, but it wasn't like this is going to be an offense lighting up the scoreboard like Sean Payton typically does. So I don't think the game flow is going to be overly concerning for Brian Robinson here. Denver's defense in general last year, a top 7 matchup for running backs. I think Brian Robinson can find the end zone again, get to about 60 yards, and be a viable flex. Moving on to my lower running backs. Got a question about Dameon Pierce earlier. Should you start Kendrick Bourne or him in the flex? And this is why I think Kendrick Bourne, as crazy as this might sound, is genuinely a consideration there. My running back 27, -9 ECR against Indianapolis. Now, if anything's working for him, it's that Indianapolis sucks. Certainly in the secondary, but also the front 7. DeForest Buckner, though, one of the beasts in the front of that front 7, and they are certainly better against the run than the pass. And very big concern here that Pierce only saw 49% of the snaps, 39% of the routes compared to 35% for Mike Boone, who also out-targeted him and just played 72% of the long down and distance and nearly all of the 2-minute drills. So that every down Dameon Pierce role that we saw in the preseason, it did not carry over. And what happens when Dare Abdullah gets activated as well? I think there's always going to be competition there for Dameon Pierce as a under 50% snap player. I don't love it. I don't love it at all. They clearly were a much pass happier team this last week. Maybe the script will be better for him, but I also just think this team is horrible. So I don't know that they'll ever be up and pounding the rock. We will see. Najee Harris, also -9 ECR against Cleveland. My running back, 29, won the matchup. Cleveland looks like a top 10 defense under Jim Schwartz. Reignited, tons of talent in that front seven between Myles Garrett, Darius Smith, JOK. That's a beastly core. And now you got Najee. One thing you liked about him was that he could ultimately get all the snaps and all the touches, that Tomlin workhorse role. That wasn't the case in week 1 at all. Jaylen Warren, as involved as we've ever seen him at the pro level. It used to be you'd get 80% to 90% of the snaps for the running back in the Tomlin offense, 53% of the snaps for Najee, 40% going to Jaylen Warren, only 46% of the routes. That used to be about 80% for Najee Harris. Now 35% went to Jaylen Warren, who significantly out-targeted him at 14% target share for Jaylen Warren, just 5% for Najee Harris. That is not good, folks. Not looking great at all. Only 5 PPR points for Najee last week. Now it's not quite as tough a matchup as the 49ers, but still a bad spot for him in a timeshare in an offense that just looks pretty hideous right now. I want nothing to do with Najee Harris. He's my lower last week. He remains that way this week. And then Isaiah Pacheco. I wish this wasn't the case. My running back, 28 against Jacksonville, -7 ECR. I think he can run against Jacksonville, and maybe that's the approach the Chiefs end up taking. He did lead the team, Pacheco, with 47% of the snaps and, shockingly, 11% of the targets. That was all encouraging, but I still was very discouraged the fact that 35% of the rushes went to Clyde Edwards-Helaire, that McKinnon saw 13% targets per route run. 67% of the short down and distance went to McKinnon, including the goal line work. No inside the 5 snaps for the bruising Pacheco. If you can't get the goal line work in this offense, that's kind of half the reason you drafted him. The Chiefs offense could plunge in for some TDs. He certainly did last year, so I would be more than happy to see this flip and put Pacheco right back into my top 20. But I think this calls for a more pass-happy script against that explosive Jacksonville offense here. My Hail Mary of the week at 28% rostered, Roschon Johnson. I just had him on my waiver wire show as a fringe top 10 pickup last night. 5 carries, 20 yards, and a touchdown. But more importantly, the 6 catches on a team high 7 targets for 35 yards. Did a lot of them come in garbage time when they were down? Sure. Yeah, they did. But they also gave the coaching staff some tape to see this guy's a beast. He was churning through tackles just like we saw in college. Don't forget, he had more forced missed tackles per touch than Bijan Robinson, his backfield mate last year. That was really the only reason he wasn't an every down back in college, was because he was behind a generational prospect who he matched by the efficiency metrics here. He tied Khalil Herbert in snaps, Roschon Johnson did. So ultimately, I think this is where we start to see the backfield continue to get turned over more and more and more to the guy that this coaching staff handpicked. They inherited Khalil Herbert, who looked pretty good on his touches. He always does. But Roschon Johnson, I thought, outplayed him and certainly got some of the more valuable touches between the short down and distance, between the routes there. So I think Roschon, if you're desperate for a running back, is a great Hail Mary. And if not him, Tajay Spears, only 15% roster right now. This guy actually outsnapped Derrick Henry in week 1. 56% of the snaps to Spears, created 47% for Derrick Henry. I get it. Usage was 100% in Derrick Henry's favor, as it absolutely should be for the King. But Tajay Spears being on the field is half the battle when you're in a backfield with Henry. And it goes to show when they're in the wrong side of the game flow, when it's a negative script and they need to throw, Spears is going to be that pass catching back. 50% of the routes went to him and a nice 13% target share as well. Was 3rd on the team. I targeted Chigo Konku and Treylon Burks. That's not bad right there. So Tajay Spears just barely missed. Ran a beautiful wheel route, streaking down the field, wide open. Tannehill does look like garbage, and that makes me a little bit nervous here. But if he connects on that wheel route, we're talking about maybe the number 1 waiver wire pickup of the week. Could easily do that this week. And Tajay Spears, I alluded to earlier, I think Cordarrelle Patterson, one of my pickups of the week ahead of time. I think Tyjae Spears is the number one guy you should be stashing ahead of this week. I would see everybody sprinting to their waiver wire after he breaks a long one and gets free. This kid has a ton of talent, and I think his role will continue to grow. The usage will match the snaps eventually for Tyjae Spears. But back to Patterson. He's back practicing in full, and sure, crowded. Bijan Robinson, Tyler Algier, absolute monsters. Most expected fantasy points and most total points for Backfield so far to kick off 2023. But we know Arthur Smith is the worst person when it comes to usage with his guys. And I wouldn't be shocked at all to see Cordarrelle Patterson jump right into a 15% target share and eat into Bijan Robinson's looks there. He's back in that joker role. Patterson is that positionless football, lining up at tight end even in training camp at times. And sure, there's a lot more mouths to feed now than compared to 2021. But we can't forget that Patterson is one of the most explosive playmakers with the ball in his hands, truly, in the league. He was a genuine league winner just 2 seasons ago when playing this joker, move him all over the formation, find mismatches type of role. In weeks 1 through 9 in 2021, Patterson was the running back 6 with 19.9 PPR fantasy points per game. He had over 450 receiving yards, 57 yards per game, and was fresh off a 6-catch, 126-yard masterpiece. And then Arthur Smith, the king of weird usage, decided to turn him into a jam him up the middle, awful bell cow type of guy. And sure, his totals went up with the carries. He only averaged, though, 10.1 fantasy points per game, running back 38. I think switching back to this joker role, even if the volume isn't quite there this season, will help Patterson do what he does best. That's big plays. If you're desperate at running back right now, why not toss in a guy that's a proven touchdown and big play machine and Cordarrelle Patterson, at least stashing him ahead of the waiver week. Now, what am I watching? Breece Hall, second week back. How much usage will he look? He got damn solid yards per clip there. 83 yard on his first carry, 20 yards on his first reception. Ultimately goes 10 carries for 127 yards. It looked like nothing had ever happened to Breece Hall. That's just the type of generational athlete he is, that type of recovery. Really, really beautiful stuff to see that elite athleticism. And now in the Zach Wilson era, what's his role going to be? That is definitely what I am monitoring. I'm also 6 spots above the ECR, so I'm getting Breece right back in the lineups, given what I saw this past week. As we move on, Wolfpack, 2 higher, lower, Hail Mary. We did get a super chat from Megan, so let me pull that up. Thank you so much, Megan Aussie. Let me find that one here. First time here in Fantasy and the Stream. I am so happy to see you. Thanks for the advice, free Puka. Grabbed in both hands. The boys in my league are not happy about it. I love to hear that, Megan. Thank you so much for supporting the show with your generous super chat. I apologize. I should have gotten to that faster. I just saw my mods comment that you had a super chat. We usually let you cut the line right away, and I should have gotten to you faster. But thank you so much for your generous here supporting the show. Looks like you also commented in that you have Herbert and Johnson in my second league. So you're racking up the good bench players here that are going to come into fruition. Carr starting my second. I love it. Definitely a good matchup there for Derek Carr, as we were talking about earlier for the Saints team against the banged up secondary. Thank you again so much for that support, though, Megan. Very welcome to Wolfpack. I'm so happy you found our stuff and you found the live stream here. Like I said, we normally go live on Thursdays with a lot more people and a lot more questions. But as a teacher, I have the teacher parent night tomorrow, so I had to get live to at least answer the questions of all you guys. So keep them coming in. Thank you again, Megan, so much for your support. And a free way to support us with over 20 of you here, that thumbs up button. Free, simple, easy, and helps us get out to more people. Please do consider it. Please keep keeping those questions in as well. We'll be to them, I'd say, in no more than 15 minutes as we wrap up here. Wide receiver, Hail Mary, higher and lower as well. My higher is, again, Mike Evans, going back to the well. I can go back to all the guys I said last week because they panned out for me, and I'm high on them again. Calvin Ridley, Zay Flowers, but I'll go back to Mike Evans the most. +7 ECR, wide receiver 16 against Chicago. He was the wide receiver 11 last week. All offseason, the Athletics subtly pumped that this was Baker's guy, and it sure looked that way. 95% of the routes saw 25% targets per route run, 30% of the total targets from Baker Mayfield, compared to 20% of the targets for Chris Godwin. And what's crazy is Mike Evans plays that big play, going streaking down the field, 12.11 average depth of targets, and yet 89% of his targets were deemed catchable. Baker Mayfield, everything's going to suck with him. I don't know about that. That was very impressive. 50% of the team's total air yards, 50% of the team's end zone targets, 19 PPR points last week. That type of usage I could get down with each and every week against a Chicago team that just got carved up by Jordan Love, who, yeah, looks good. But, 3 touchdowns for him. I think it's a great spot there for Mike Evans. I think it's also a great spot for both of your Chargers receivers. I'm +3 ECR on Keenan Allen, wide receiver 10. You don't need me to encourage you to play Keenan Allen. I'm sure you were starting him anyways, given 29% target share, 10.89 average up to targets. That's deeper than we've ever seen. Keenan Allen moved around the formation more often than ever before, 42% of air yards. This is a new vertical Keenan Allen, and he was thriving in the role, just barely missed a touchdown. Would have otherwise been a monster. Still scored 14 points, but was on the fringe of a 22-point day had he gotten to the end zone there. So love me some Keenan Allen, but I also love Mike Williams, my wide receiver 20, +4 ECR. So a fringe starter by most. I think you have to lock him into your lineup. Saw 50% of the end zone targets this last week, a 22% air yard share. Keenan Allen averaging more average up the target than Mike Williams is really something I would never expect to see. He got banged up, Mike Williams, in this game, but did ultimately come back. I think this is the type of explosion atmosphere where he just dominates this pathetic Tennessee secondary. They gave up the most points to wide receivers last year, second most points to Kickoff this season with 40 points given up to those Saints guys, 18 catches, 262 yards, and a touchdown given up to the Saints wide receivers in that opening week. Beautiful stuff for him. And we were just talking about Puka Nacua as a dominant key pickup for this week. You picked him up. Let's get him in the lineup. I'm +9 ECR. He's my wide receiver 33 against San Fran. Just to reiterate, had you missed the waiver wire show, 42.9% target share, a whopping 15 targets, both highest in the NFL, tying Tyreek Hill as well. That was the most targets by a rookie wide receiver in week 1 ever. And the big thing, 43% of them were first read targets. That's more than Cooper Kupp ever had last season in his insane record-breaking year. He took 10 of those catches for 119 yards. Some of them were deep down the field. A lot of them were those layup easy targets. And that's what I love about him. And yeah, sure, San Fran, scary on paper, one of the best defenses in the league. No arguing there. But that actually might help Puka Nacua this week, given that they are a very zone-heavy coverage team. They specifically use a ton of cover 4 and cover 3. I'm shouting out Jacob Gibbs on Twitter here with some great metrics. Rams versus cover 4, Puka saw 5 of his targets against cover 4. Against cover 3, Puka Nacua saw 7 targets there. He is an absolute definition of a zone beater, a type of guy that is smart and savvy and knows how to sit in the right spots. And 33% target share in single high coverage looks as well, according to Football Insights. So a lot of the metrics point to the coverage that he dominates is what the 49ers love to run. And don't forget last year, the 49ers did give up the 10th most points to wide receivers. You cannot run on them, but you could throw on them. Last year, I don't think that's going to be overly different. Stafford slinging for over 330 yards last week, looking as good as ever. I think Puka Nacua, if you blew the fab to go get him in your lineups. I am all in on playing him this week. In terms of my lower, you'll start with Garrett Wilson at Dallas, my wide receiver 27 -9 ECR. Pains me to say it. I have him in multiple leagues with my second round target. Zach Wilson is back. If you've watched this show, you've heard these before, but let's remind you of the Garrett Wilson splits last year with Zach Wilson. 9 games with him, 8.8 fantasy points per game, averaged 3.7 receptions per game, and 49 yards per game. Did not score a single touchdown with Zach Wilson. Meanwhile, 8 games without Zach Wilson, 17.3 fantasy points per game. He was about to be Devontae Adams with Aaron Rodgers. This is so painful to see. Could Garrett Wilson be improved? Could Zach Wilson have taken a step forward? Maybe. He did connect on that nice touchdown. Went up and let Garrett Wilson do his thing, and that's what he's got to do. Maybe he becomes his binky and he just dinks and dunks, and yay, maybe Aaron Rodgers' influence helps him to trust his receiver more. But against this ferocious secondary of the Cowboys, against the even more ferocious pass rush, I think Zach Wilson's going to be crapping his pants all night, and I don't want anything to do with it. It's hard to bench Garrett Wilson, but I'm 9 spots below ECR. And if you have a comparable option, Mike Evans versus Garrett Wilson, for example, a question I got, I'm going Mike Evans 10 out of 10 times this week. I'm also benching Drake London at this point. Green Bay, wide receiver 37, in my rankings, that's -4 the ECR. Desmond Ridder, look no further than the fact that he only threw for 115 yards this last week, only 18 pass attempts. This is as abysmal of a pass high as you can find. London played 90% of the snaps and logged a whopping 1 target on his 20 routes for 0 receptions, 0 yards. Can't get any worse than that. I agree. But he's also facing Jair Alexander's shadow coverage, who locked down DJ Moore this last week. I think he'll do the same for Drake London. You're beating the Packers. It's definitely through the run where they're much, much more susceptible. And that's what Atlanta wants to do anyways. So I think they bludgeon them on the ground. And Christian Kirk, minus 11 ECR against Kansas City, my wide receiver 45. He only was restricted to 3 wide receiver sets, essentially. Outsnapped, out-targeted by both Zay Jones and especially Calvin Ridley, the new alpha of this offense, having a whopping 30% target share, 95% of the routes, just an absolutely dominant player. And Calvin Ridley, great to see that monster wide receiver 1 back and doing his thing. And it definitely came at the expense of Christian Kirk. With that limited usage, down to about 60% of the snaps, he ultimately only logged 1 target, 1 reception, 9 yards, had legitimately 0 catches through 3 quarters. It's bad. It's really bad. Now, against the Chiefs, who have been susceptible to slot receivers, if he's ever going to break out, it'd be in a game like this where there'll probably be more 3 receiver sets chasing points. But I don't want to trust Christian Kirk in any lineups after that abysmal usage. I'd rather have Kendrick Bourne, only 33% rostered as we move into my Hail Marys. I think that jumps up to 75 or more % this week when he goes crazy once again. He's the clear-cut wide receiver 1 here. 93% of the routes last week, only 47% of routes for Juju. Saw team high Kendrick Bourne, 11 targets, 21% share. Mac Jones, as we talked about in my quarterback Hail Marys, 316 yards, 3 TDs, a league high, 54 pass attempts. 6 for 64 with 2 touchdowns for Kendrick Bourne. Like he always does, he delivers when used. It's ridiculous that he was in that doghouse all last year and goes to show it. Wide receiver 30 just 2 seasons ago when he was about a 60%, 70% route participation type of guy. He still caught 79% of his passes despite going 14.5 yards per reception just a couple years ago. He can absolutely ball, and you cannot discount Mac and Bourne's chemistry. Definitely worth a Hail Mary start, but should he be gone in your league? I'm way more competitive than that, Wolf. Well, how about the Texans wide receivers? Robert Woods, 7% rostered, and my personal favorite, Tank Dell, 4% rostered. I like both of these guys this week. We hinted at it earlier, but Noah Brown to the IR, opening up 76% of the routes, only 9% of the targets last week, but that's still a ton of routes being run by him. It's crazy that Tank Dell only ran 46% of the routes and saw equal targets to him. That's because he's such a better target earner. When he's out there, he gets the rock. He had 13% of the air yards compared to minus 5% of the air yards for Noah Brown, who was just getting dinks and dunks all day. So Tank Dell on less than half the snaps got more fantasy points, and I think already cited by D'Amico Ryans as the next man up in 3 wide receiver sets. Tank Dell was the guy that banged the table, CJ Stroud. I want Tank Dell on my team after our combine together. He loved the way he run routes. This guy was ridiculously open all preseason, both in games, throughout camp. So I love Tank Dell, a much more vertical element now joining this offense. And again, CJ Stroud's boy. So he's the guy I actually go to first as a streamer. I think he brings a little bit more of a ceiling, but safety would maybe be with Robert Woods. He had a whopping 10 targets, 6 catches for 57 yards. Pretty usable numbers right there. And I think the bigger takeaway for all of this might be they ran a whopping 72 plays, the Texans did, 54 of them passes. This is a huge pie. Wasn't the tastiest of pies in week 1, but against a Colts secondary, absolute joke. Maybe the worst in the league. According by PFF average grade, they are right there at the bottom. There's nobody here. So yes, Nico Collins, 11 targets. He's the number 1 guy, but right behind him, Robert Woods, and then that big play threat of Tank Dell, I think are both well worth your Hail Mary consideration. Wrapping up the stream now, tight ends, higher, lower, Hail Marys. Hunter Henry, my tight end 8, that's +3 the ECR. He's only 42% rostered. I don't know how he's not on every single team, given how abysmal tight end is in fantasy. He right now is the number 1 tight end in fantasy, Hunter Henry. He's the yardage leader in the NFL at tight end. Now, he only has 56 yards. That just goes to show you more reflective of how bad this position is than how good Hunter Henry is, but he is damn good too. I'm a Pats fan. Some of those catches he made, like a 4th downer, one-handed snag, multiple contested grabs, 6 targets, 5 catches, 56 yards in that score. You got the Mac Jones narrative with them being roommates. Talk about best friends with A.J. Brown and Jalen Hurts and Stephon. There's so many of those narratives. What about the roommate narrative? I love it. better even than the Breakfast Club of Cooper Kupp and Matthew Stafford. So I really like Hunter Henry moving forward. He definitely looks like the number one tight end option here. All the camp reports seeming to come to fruition that Kendrick Bourne and Hunter Henry were the surprising target leaders all camp. That's exactly what we saw in week 1. Let's see it continue against a Miami team that just gave up the 4th most points to tight ends. That should be a shootout style game. And then we got Dalton Kincaid, another guy I'm a little bit higher on, 4 spots above the ECR when I rank him at my tight end 10 against the Las Vegas Raiders. Now, he didn't have a huge game, 4 catches, 26 yards, but it's more the underlying usage that suggests a breakout will be here sooner than later. He played 47 snaps at wide receiver, Dalton Kincaid, only 8 in line, running 76% of the routes. He didn't see a ton of targets, 10%, matched by Dawson Knox. Those two kind of nibbled at each other's cheese all day, and that's going to be a little bit of an annoyance throughout the season, I imagine. But ultimately, I like Kincaid as more of that slot receiver, the guy moving all over the formation. Raiders were a top 12 matchup against the tight end, so good spot for your guy this week. I could see him definitely continuing to carve himself out a much bigger role in Dalton Kincaid this week. Lower, as usual, Kyle Pitts. Welcome back to the list. My tight end 17 against Green Bay, -8 ECR. He was a tight end 17 in week 1 and barely got there. One late deep bomb to him, and it was frightening snap share and usage yet again for him. Almost 60% or so of the snaps. More of the routes. That was good to see when they were throwing. They actually went to him, but as we just reminded you, only 18 throws this last week. So very concerning overall pie. Very concerning that Kyle Pitts still can't earn himself an every down role here. Very concerning that the tight end 22 kicks off his 2023 with a tight end 17 type of performance, just barely getting to that tight end 17 as well. So I, again, as I've always been with Kyle Pitts, I'll believe it when I see it. I'll believe it when he has the quarterback play and the play caller that's actually going to use him. That's not here in Atlanta, at least not this year. So I'm not in. I'm also lower on Gerald Everett. He's ranked right now as a top 14-ish guy, a fringe starter for many. He only ran 55% of the routes. Donald Parham was right behind him with 40% and actually saw just as many targets at 10%. And Donald Parham saw the more valuable stuff, 50% of the end zone targets compared to 0% for Gerald Everett. His average depth of target for Parham, 5.67. Everett, 3. Just gross overall usage, 4 PPR points outside your top 20 guys. Gerald Everett, not a guy. A lot of people consider him a popular streamer. Not for me. In fact, I might even rather have Donald Parham in my lineup given that type of usage. So maybe Parham's a Hail Mary. I don't think you have to go that far, though, because Luke Musgrave out there in all but 19% of leagues right now. He caught 3 passes for 50 yards. You got Christian Watson still banged up. I think you can absolutely fire up Luke Musgrave if you're desperate for a tight end. He ran 80% of the routes. That's elite for a tight end, especially a rookie tight end. And his average depth of target, 18 yards, leading the position so far with that, matching everything we saw in training camp where he's streaking down the field, bringing a vertical element this offense doesn't have. 75% of those targets were also deemed catchable despite them being so deep down the field. And if he hadn't tripped over himself, he would have definitely scored and been one of those guys everyone's hammering into laps. He had 8 PPR points, was the tight end 13 on that. And had he scored on that long bomb, broken play touchdown, he would have probably been the tight end 4 of the week. Against an Atlanta team that's not a scary secondary, I'm in love with Luke Musgrave. And if you're even more desperate, Logan Thomas, 3% rostered, the tight end 11 in week 1. It was supposed to be a mix between Logan Thomas and Cole Turner, and Thomas just dominated. 78% of the routes, a whopping 25% target share, 7 yards average depth of target, not horrible for the guy. And he racked up, decent stats, 4 catches, 43 yards at tight end. He'll take that in the year of 2023. Now, he did have 2 to 3 drops on those missed connections there. He is still 32 years old. Didn't look all that impressive, but the usage was there. And at tight end, it's rare to find an 8-target guy, certainly at 3% rostered right now. So I think Logan Thomas definitely warrants some streaming consideration. Wolfpack, that wraps up my higher lower Hail Mary. That wraps up all the content I had planned for our week 2 preview. So let's now dive into the mailbag. As we do, please do consider that thumbs up button. Help support your boys. Get us out to more people. It means the world. We'll bring in first our Colin, Mr. Campanelli. How are we doing this week, brother?
The streak lives.
The streak lives as always.
Yes. So Wolf, I have I have Deion Jackson on my bench right now. Would you drop him for Atwell or who was the other one? Would you drop him for was it
Atwell,
Atwell?
yes. I mean, already Atwell, but if there's another player you're considering,
I
maybe.
could
But
get
yes, we're
Shaheed. I
dropping
could get
Deion Jackson.
Shaheed.
I like Shaheed too. I think I prefer Atwell.
Okay.
Shaheed might have more longer term upside though. I just worry when Kamara comes back, another mouth in an already pretty congested situation. But then you also have Atwell if Cooper Kupp comes back. What happens there? But I think Cooper Kupp's the bigger if. We already know Kamara is coming back. I really was impressed with Atwell. I love Puka Nacua. He's obviously the main vein there right now. But Atwell was nothing to slouch at. Another 119 yards for him. I think he's a really interesting player. So I'd pick him up first.
Okay. Because I
You
do
have to
have
start one because I'd rather start Shaheed if you have to start one this week.
I don't need to start anyone. It was just more of like a stash and wait because I do have Kamara coming off a suspension. So I'm going to also need a spot on my bench eventually to bring Kamara back. And right now
Yeah,
that team is holding Akers and Kyron. So I'm
gotcha.
kind of using the next 2 weeks to see which one's going to be the
Who gets
dog
the
there.
chopping block? I would
Yeah.
say the only other thing, if it's just a pure stash at this point, and you don't think you're going to even need to use Atwell over the next 4 or 5 weeks, maybe pick up Tajay Spears. What if something happens to King Henry and then this guy becomes the de facto number one? He's already involved as a pass catcher. If it's just purely a stash and you don't see yourself using these receivers anytime soon because you have good depth, I think Tajay Spears actually brings more to the table as a pure stash.
Yeah, he's been taken.
Okay. Yeah. And maybe it's Atwell then at that point just to see if this role continues for him. But if you're thinking stash, maybe try to bring out a list of maybe text me any running backs, backups that might have some intrigue there and let me know there. But that's where I look to my stash type of plays more often is more of a handcuff like that.
Awesome. Thanks, Wolf. Have a good one.
Thank you, Campanelli. Always great to see you, brother. All righty. And now to all the rest of the questions. Looks like we got about 30, 40. I know it's not our usual Thursday, but thank you guys so much. Good to see a decent involvement here at this point. As we go, please do consider again that thumbs up button. Let's mow through what we got. Week 1 never happened. We're on to say exactly. As Belichick said, we're on to Cincinnati. We're on to Cincinnati. Let's go. Daddy Davis or Puka in the flex. Charlie, especially in full PPR, I'm rolling Puka, baby. Let's go. You burned your budget for a reason. Let's go after him. What's up, Wolfpack? Great to see you, Mr. Bulldog. PTA, do your fantasy homework, Wolf. You know I'm doing that fantasy homework every single night. Joe Saviano. Rest in peace, Danny Dimes. I don't know, not yet, Mike. Let's get a week against Arizona. Much softer matchup. Let's see what we see. And if he sucks again this week, yeah, send him to the trash heap. He'll be done. But I'm not going to give up the dream quite yet. Eagles cover, but take the under. Yeah, I'm definitely doing both there, David Campanelli. I agree with you on that Thursday night. Thought that about the Bills too. I don't remember exactly what I said, but was it about their choke job? Remind me what I said, Mike. I can't remember. Sit Madison, play Algier instead. Joe, great question. So sit Madison Thursday night, ferocious front seven, but also an every snap player. Very few running backs like that. Algier, a softer matchup, better usage, better run scheme in general. Gun to my head, Joe, I think I'm going Algier. Tough call. I have them ranked very similarly. Got born in Hunter Henry and felt like a homer. It's a homer, but look at that, Tunes. It's panning out for you. I had some last of my best ball drafts as I started to hear more and more hype about Bourne. Lot of late Henry, Mac, and especially Bourne last round stacks. I have a few teams actually where Jalen Hurts, I always punt my quarterback. If I get Jalen Hurts, I want to punt my second one. Mac Jones was in all of those lineups. And those teams are looking pretty damn solid right now. So yeah, homer, but this offense is really looking solid. Mulu, rate this trade. Aaron Jones, 8 at Dylan, and I trade. I can't. I have no idea what you're saying. Mulu, Lion, tight end, Dak. Come on, I don't know. I need a little bit clearer there. So I also traded Wilson for Mostert. I think that's a little bit of an overreaction because if we get a new quarterback in here, maybe Zach Wilson takes a step. I think you definitely sold low on Garrett Wilson. Even if you needed running back depth, I don't like that move at all. I can't really understand what the other trade is, Molu. So if you want to type it a little bit clearer, I'd be happy to assess it for you. Favorite bag of chips from Krana Saw. I'm a big fan of the sweet chili Doritos, that purple bag. Really big fan of those. I also love Cape Cod barbecue. And in general, I'm trying to think, there's like one other one. What am I forgetting? There's one that I absolutely love. It will come to me like midstream and I'll scream it out there for you, Krana. But sweet chili Doritos and Cape Cod, big fan. I also just love like the sour cream and cheddar chips. I think those are always great. Flex 1 PPR. I always appreciate you asking non-fantasy questions too, Krana. It's always fun. Addison, Flowers, P. Ryan, or pick up one from the waivers. It's Zay Flowers. I'm in love with Zay Flowers. I would have used him again in my higher lower Hail Mary, but I was like, Evans repeats, Zay Flowers, he repeat, Calvin Ridley. I mean, I could run it back every single week, I feel like, with those three guys, and they'll make me look smart. But Zay Flowers, +5 ECR. The guy is a beast. 10 targets, 40% share as a rookie. You love to see it. So I'm sticking with Zay Flowers, Krana. Absolutely. Jordan Love over Geno. It's not insane. I do have Geno higher given the Detroit Lions matchup, second most points to QBs last year. But if he's going the opposite direction, as you say, I'm with you. Especially if Watson's out there, a more dynamic weapon, I can totally see it, Ibaki. It's not absurd by any means. So I personally would go Geno, I think. But if you're feeling that, like that's not an unjustifiable one. I'm not going to steer you off of it. Who for my wide receiver 2 spot? Mike Williams, Brandon Cooks, Lockett, or Jacoby? I think Jacoby's going to be banged up, Juan. I mean, looked awesome in week 1, but I doubt he's going to be out there. I'm going Mike Williams. Tennessee, first and second most points to wide receivers the past 2 years. I'm going to let that one rip. Love this comment from Campanelli. Allen Robinson, bad karma. Absolutely. Just comes into your locker room and brings everyone else down. I'm with you there. Want nothing to do with him. Juan Pena with another one. Who for my flex? James Conner, Dalvin Cook, Antonio Gibson. No. And I know I was high on him last week. No, thank you. One of my worst calls so far this year. Hopefully he turns it around. Tyler Lockett, Brandon Cooks, A.J. Dillon. So if Aaron Jones is out, you're putting A.J. Dillon into that running back 2 spot. So now we're looking at the other guys, and I'm probably going James Conner. I mean, 83% of the snaps, 17% of routes. We talked about him earlier. I think he is the play there of those other options. Tyler Lockett would be the boom play, but I'm going there. Brandon Cook's probably not even going to play. Hayden Hurst, Henry, and Higbee. Who would you keep and who of the two would you drop? I'd drop Hurst. I know he had a great week 1, but I don't trust that Panthers attack. I think Henry's usage sticks. I think Higbee still has some upside these next few weeks. I think Higbee, if he doesn't do anything this week and Puka remains that just clear-cut number 1 guy, you can cut him next week. But Henry, probably my favorite of that bunch. Mr. Trey Sarosinko, 305, Pitbull, what's going on? Hope all is well. Week 1 of the books. Trey Sarosinko, I honestly had a similar week. I think I went 1-4. It was bad. It was hideous. But week 1, so many injuries, so tough to navigate. Hopefully it came back hard on the waiver wire, picked up some potential saviors like Puka Nacua, Kyron Williams. I bid all my fab. I literally bid 100% of my fab this last week to get $40 on Puka, 32 on Kyron, 12 on Zay Jones. I think I spent 5 on Tutu. I just sent it all. Week 1's always the best waivers of the league. Would you still start T? Yeah. I mean, 7 targets is fine. I think this offense finds a groove. Yeah. Thank you, NC, again for that super chat. It doesn't go unnoticed. Half PPR. Kendrick Bourne or Zay Flowers. Yeah, Flowers for me. I'm not benching Flowers. I do think that game could shoot out, but I think Zay Flowers is definitely the better play, and that game has shootout potential as well. Thanks for the advice, Puka. Oh, yeah, you already said this one, Megan. Thank you again for your super chat. It was very generous of you. Fantasy football, first year playing, and won my first game by, man, first time out there. So you've really experienced the thrill and the twists and turns already in week 1. So pumped you pulled the win out, Megan. Awesome to hear. That's what it's made of. That's what we love. That's why we play the game. Under half a point, a reception in half PPR leagues would have swung the game. That's awesome. Congratulations. What a way to debut your fantasy football career. Awesome stuff. Those are also the most heartbreaking moments when it goes the other way, by the way. So be ready to just be smashed and destroyed at certain points when that stuff happens. Would you drop Schultz or Kmet for any? Yeah. I think Schultz really sucks. I would drop him maybe for Hurst. I keep seeing the Chig Okonkwo like usage and athleticism, and I get it, but that offense just is gross to me. So maybe Schultz for Hurst. I don't know. We're rolling in the weeds there, Mr. Trace Arasenko. I don't think any of that matters. Hunter Henry's out there. I'd go for him. And I really don't keep any. I'd maybe just keep Komet. I'd rather stack up handcuffs, and all those guys are always going to be similar, and most of them will stay on the waiver wire. So I would not. I see that second part of the question. I would not keep 2 tight ends on that roster. I was in on Tua last year, faded this season. I mean, yeah, as he stays healthy, I think we're in for some fire stuff here this year. I wish we were on there. Wolf, you're the man. Giuseppe, you're the man, too. Thank you for always being here. What's up, D. Lorenzo? Great to see you, man. Always a pleasure. I almost traded Johnson last week. Yeah, it's good you held on to him. I think he's going to be very interesting, for sure. Dang, man, was figuring Kareem Hunt would have been picked up by now. Asking too much or something. I don't know what it is, Jazz. At this point, like between him, Kareem Hunt, Leonard Fournette, there's so many openings. These guys just must not look good at all. So, yeah, I agree. Like, I don't know what's going on there. Maybe he's asking for too much, or maybe he just isn't good anymore. He didn't look great last year. I feel like dropping Herbert for Roschon. Well, Doug, if you feel that gut, you go for it. Similar snaps, similar usage. Roschon seems a little bit more ascending. I'd probably rather have Herbert, but it's close. It's absolutely close. Mac Jones or Carr, Superflex. Juan, that's really close. 19 and 20 in my rankings. I go a little bit slightly on Carr, I think. Feels a little safer than Mac. Mac, I almost want to see twice before I buy in. But, I mean, that could be a shootout, too. I really am high on both these guys entering the week. So, I would, yeah, it's risky. We'll see. But I go slightly Derek Carr there. Turpin, Duel, maybe Jaws. I mean, we're talking deep league now. It was intriguing usage. That I could see this being one of those things that, like, in 2 weeks, we're all like, we should have bought in that first week. He's going all over the place. I think it's also a little bit more of like them being up so crazy that they're like, yeah, let's experiment, see what we have. And he didn't disappoint. So maybe it is a sign of things to come, Jaws. I don't know. It's a good thought. I haven't really given it much thought. And now you have it on my brain a little bit more. Intriguing. James Cook, Sanders, or Monty, half PPR. I'm leaning Monty there. We saw how many touchdowns, 3, the Seahawks surrendered to the Rams. And I think the Detroit Lions will pound it down their throat. We could see Monty score 3 himself. So, yeah, I'm going Montgomery there. 77% of snaps last week. Whew. What do you think about Burrow? I think he bounces back. I think missing camp and not being healthy, we saw it last year too. I think he bounces back, but honestly, him and Richardson are my 8-9. So Richardson kind of feels safer against a bad Houston team. I'd probably go Burrow still, though. I mean, I think he bounces back big. Josh Kelly, Nico Collins, or Christian Watson this week. PPR, Lex, plant some trees. Go plant those trees, Lex. I mean, if Watson plays, I think it's him. If Eckler sits, Kelly seems very appealing. Tennessee, though, you got to have that warning. They're one of the best run Ds in the league. So it's Watson if he plays. It's Kelly if Eckler sits, even with that preface. I mean, Collins does intrigue me with 11 targets against the bad. These are all interesting options. I can see why you're asking it. But I would rank them Watson, Kelly without Eckler, and then Nico Collins. But I like all 3. Full PPR, too. Like, if you wanted to pivot to Collins, those 11 targets, I don't blame you. Start one between these receivers. Evans, Puka, Mike. I'm going to go Mike Evans there. And I love all 3 of these guys. I don't know if you saw the segment, Raymond. Those were my 3 higher receivers. So, I mean, I love them all. But I like Mike Evans the most. I hope so, Brian. I hope Garrett gets force-fed. I do agree he's too good not to be. Every other quarterback other than Zach Wilson did. He averaged nearly 18 points per game with any quarterback. Zach Wilson not included. Joe Flacco, Mike White. He was an 18-point-per-game guy with those 2 bums. He should be force-fed. Will Zach Wilson actually do it? He didn't last year. Maybe he does. Maybe he learned from Rodgers. I sure hope so. I'll believe it when I see it, Brian. I hope so. Trust me. I really want it for my fantasy teams, too. Patrick Sullivan, good evening, too. Likely is awful. Yeah, that sucked. I had him in 3 out of my 5 leagues. That's a big reason why I'm 1-5 right now. Devontae Adams is hurt now. I think he's going to be okay, Johnny D. I think that was like, we saw it all last year too, like veteran rest, If it looks serious, he's resting tomorrow and Friday, okay, now we're concerned. But I think you're fine, Johnny. No need for the purple crying face right now. Thoughts on Judy? Debo? So, is he worth less? Yeah. I mean, IU's blow up suggests he's the true wide receiver 1 here, Nicola. That being said, I still think Debo is a monster. There's some interesting stats out there about against more zone-heavy teams, Debo feasts. Against more man-heavy teams, Ayuk goes nuts. Last week was about an 80% man rate, and that's why Ayuk went nuts. So you got to kind of pay attention to those coverages if you can find that stuff out. Get who they're facing off the top of my head. I'm leaning Debo still. I think he's due for the breakout this week, but that's close, Nacua. Always good to see you, Thomas Medina. Tomas. Pick one for tight end. Knox, Chig, Everett, or Ferguson. Not a big fan of any of these. I actually prefer Logan Thomas. But is Luke Musgrave out there, Tomas? I really like Luke Musgrave. I would go him well above any of those four. If I have to go one of those four, it's Knox. Go for the better offense. Too bad Henry's gone. Jeff Lee, what's going on? Oof, we got a good amount of questions. I'm going to start mowing through these a little faster. I'd love to be off by 8:45. So thank you again. So awesome to see so many questions coming in on a non-Thursday stream, on a Thursday stream. Hey, Wolf, what's going on, Jeff Lee? Half PPR, two or three running backs. Jalen Warren, Khalil Herbert, Madison, or Pierce? Yeah, I mean, I'm concerned with Pierce being a dud, and I have him as my lower running back of the week, and I'm still above these other guys. Like Warren, more of an intriguing handcuff. Herbert, I don't know, three-headed nightmare. Madison's the only real featured back here, so I got to go him even in a tougher matchup, and I'm going to keep with Damian Pierce. I don't love it, though. Zay Jones, Shaheed, or Woods? I go Zay Jones there. But you have Kirk, too. So maybe you go Shaheed, especially if you're just waiting kind of for Deontay. You know, that kind of matches up well with Kamara coming back, too. Need one flex full PPR. Mostert, Scary Terry, Swift, Addison, Nacua, Kyron Williams for TS. Full PPR. A lot of interesting options here. TS. I don't think it's either Rams guy, and I loved him, but you just have a nice enough roster here. Is it Scary Terry? I don't know. These guys, it's just a lump of like all middling kind of guys that I like. Like Addison tomorrow, Swift could be the featured back. Maybe you go Puka and just ride the 15 target wave TS. It's a tough call. I'd go either Terry or Puka with maybe a slightly new Terry, but he didn't look fully healthy. Go Puka, ride the wave, baby. Gabe, would you trade away DK for T? I mean, why? What are we doing there? Swapping similar to similar? I do trust Burrow more than Geno, but DK looked good in that first game, so I don't think so. I guess maybe, but I don't know. Probably not. I don't like doing trades that are pretty even. Like, it doesn't do anything for anybody. It just shakes up your fantasy locker room unless you feel you need it. But on my bench is a Chain, Piran, Jameson, Quentin. Should I drop any for Kelly or Kyron? Yeah, I think you absolutely should. I think you can drop a Chain and maybe even JMO for now if you think you can get him later. Even Quentin Johnson. I drop any of those three. Keep Piran, but any of those three for those two, I would absolutely do muffins. In half PPR, Flex, Davis, Collins, or Musgrave? I would go Gabe Davis, Pat. Collins is very intriguing for me this week, too, though. Trade Dobbs for Madison? I would do that, Smirky. Yeah. It's very rare you can find a true every down back, and that's what Madison is right now. Tap PPR, Tua or Fields? Tua, Sarah Riley. Absolutely. James Cook, Rashad White, Brian Robinson, or Javonte? I think I like Rashad White the most this week. Great usage. Didn't do much with it. If he doesn't do it this week against Chicago, then maybe we cut him. All right, I'm going rapid fire, Wolfpack. Mac did score 25 points. Yeah. I'm doing good, Mr. Andre. I would do Gabe Davis over Brandon Cooks. And yeah, I'd keep Cam Akers one more week. Let's see what this shakes out to be. Dobbs, Zay Jones, Josh Kelly. I'm going, if Eckler's out, Josh Kelly, Krish. If not, Dobbs. About the Bills. It's about playing at home opener. Oh, yeah. You're saying the Eagles. That's true. Yeah, I agree with you there. And Kelly, card chart. I don't know. I don't remember the question, Pat. Sorry. Hey, any tight end that are free agents? Hunter Henry, baby. And if not him, Luke Musgrave. I like both those guys. Hey, where do you think Kamara will rank? I think he's going to be solid in the team. I mean, this offense looks really competent under Derek Carr. So I'm intrigued to see how he fits in. Madison or Mike Williams? I'm going Mike Williams there, Geeb. Big play against a bad secondary. Judy Limited, I know you're not his biggest fan. It's not only that I'm not his biggest fan. It's more so that I am not a fan of this offense at all. So it just didn't look any better. All right, so I don't know. I'd rather see him do it, and I'd rather play Dobbs or Bourne at this point. Yeah, sweet Thad Chili all around, Johnson. Great points again. I like that you bring some deep league sleepers that I'm not even considering. Ramsey, Jay Fields, Purdy, or Mac Jones. I would probably still stay with Fields here. The ceiling is just so high if and when they decide to turn the script and just let him run. If they don't do it, he's going to suck again. But to me, he kind of matched these guys. Mac Jones had a little bit more, but that's another one I want to see till I believe. Purdy's the safest option here. I'm going to go Fields, though. All right, Wolfpack, that wraps up all our questions. Thank you so much. On the way out, please do consider that thumbs up button helping us grow. Hit that sub if you enjoyed it as well. We're live 4 times a week. Next time will be Sunday morning for all your rest of your sweet sit starts. And we'll have more news to sift through for you to make even better decisions then. So thanks again so much for your support. A surprisingly big mailbag tonight. A few nice super chats, Megan. Thank you again. NC Firearms as well. Appreciate you guys supporting the show with those super chats. All our content, all my rankings, rotostreetjournal.com, all of it's free. So feed and breed those fantasy wolves, baby. Later.